initially welcome to my channel. My name is before I got long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome. So I had chronic pain from the age of 12, and the way that would manifest was normally that I would get an injury. So it might be a legitimate injury in that I was doing sport and something happened, or I jumped off a wall and hurt my ankle. But what was abnormal was that the injury would then last for years and the pain would stay. Sometimes inflammation would show up in scans. So I couldn't really figure out what was wrong, and I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2012. And at the time I was diagnosed, I was just told this is an incurable condition. I was told that by more than one doctor. Anytime I looked at any leaflet about fibromyalgia, I just saw that it was really depressing, and it started listing lots of symptoms I didn't even have, or issues I didn't have, which I didn't want to think about. I didn't want to think maybe I'll get these symptoms. And so I just stayed away from looking at things online. I didn't try to find any solutions. It was easier for me to just try and live my life as best I could with the pain and manage it myself in whatever way I could. So I couldn't do the sports that I really wanted to do, but I could do other sports. So I had to adjust what I was doing in that sense. But I could work, I could socialize, I could lead a relatively normal life. I also had food intolerances, so I couldn't eat dairy, I couldn't eat gluten, I was reactive to sugar, and my diet was quite restricted on a regular basis. Because of this, I couldn't just go to friends' houses and eat what they were eating. I was constantly monitoring my diet and trying to figure out what would help. And so I was sort of constantly in a trying to fix myself situation, even though I wasn't putting lots of time into it. I always felt there was something wrong, that my body was overreactive, that I was oversensitive. If I went to a physio, I was often told that there was something not right with my nervous system in terms of how tense my muscles were and how tense my body was. So I got long COVID in early 2020. So my initial COVID infection was mild. I had trouble breathing. I had pain in my chest when I was breathing, heart palpitations, fatigue, generally felt unwell. And those symptoms just lingered for a very long time. And they did slowly improve with time. I was able to go for short walks. I was able to work to a limited extent. And I took good care of myself. I was trying to help myself with meditation, breathing exercises, eating well, and I did improve with time. But once I improved, about a month after I would say I had no symptoms, which was about October 2020, I then started getting symptoms again. And at the time, I had a number of stressful things going on in my life, so I went into denial about having symptoms, or that I needed to help myself, so I took no time off work. So by 2021, I had become significantly worse. I wasn't able to work, I wasn't able to do my shopping. I could go for a very short walk at the start, and then I was unable to go for walks. And I needed to move from the UK to Dublin so that my family could help me. And when I got to Dublin, I got worse. I was unable to wash my hair. I was unable to walk around the garden. I couldn't go down the stairs. In terms of the symptoms that I had really bad orthostatic intolerance where I couldn't sit up for long. And if I was sitting for 10 minutes, I'd need to start holding my head up with my hands because it just felt like the weight of gravity was really pulling me down. I had migraines, especially if I did more activity, I would get a migraine. So if I was to try and wash my hair myself, I would get a migraine. If I walked around the garden, which I tried a couple of times, I'd get a migraine for a number of days. I had really severe fatigue. I had a lot of brain fog. my cognition was impaired. So I couldn't look at a screen for very long, I couldn't read for very long, I couldn't speak to friends on a phone at all. So I felt very isolated.
In the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri. So for everyone maybe out of the country, that's right smack dab in the middle of the United States. It's about as middle as you can get.
So yeah, why don't you take us back? Tell us a bit about your journey with all of this.
Before I was sick, I was a very normal, I think I was 27 when I got sick. It was only 11 months ago, so I should remember. But the older and older I get, my memory goes. But yeah, I was just a normal guy. I'm married. My wife and I spend a lot of time together. We've got a couple dogs, so just living the married life with no kids. And I did video a lot of weddings. That was kind of my side hustle for quite a while because I was an educator before that. And when I got sick, it was actually last November. I got hit with COVID at a wedding because I'm an idiot and was filming weddings during a pandemic, and yeah, changed my whole world. Flipped the whole world upside down for me, and it's been a journey. You know, when I first got sick, my first 2 weeks, like I said, I got sick in November, and my wife and I both got it. Well, I got it and I gave it to her. And our first 2 weeks were pretty mild for COVID. I don't know if you've had COVID yet or before. I'm glad you're shaking your head no. But it's been pretty mild for us. And really through the first 2 weeks, it was just a lot of uncertainty because this was back in November. This was before vaccines hit. This was before a lot of knowledge was coming about. And I had never even heard of long haulers or anything like that. I had no idea people were having long-term issues with it. And so, you know, when I was getting through it, I started to develop some shortness of breath and, you know, the typical, you know, sick feeling. And it got to the point where my shortness of breath was so severe, it never really let up. And I ended up going to the urgent care, and they got me some prednisone, and that helped. And, you know, after that 5 or 6 day dose of prednisone, the shortness of breath kind of came back. And that was kind of my big symptom for a while, because after my wife got over the symptoms of COVID and she was back to being normal, she went back to work and able to just start up life again. Although my initial infection of feeling, you know, sick, you know how you feel when you're sick, that somewhat went away, but then it just kind of revved right back up after a couple of weeks. And I developed a lot of different symptoms like shortness of breath. And when I say shortness of breath, I had shortness of breath for 2 months straight, and it was nonstop. It wasn't during activity, it wasn't during you know, movement or of any kind. I was laying in bed because I've been lucky enough to be able to work from home, and so I moved my little office into my bed and just started working right there. And it was very scary not being able to breathe for 2 whole months constantly. That's really what was probably initially the scariest thing. But in addition to that, I developed a lot of chest pain. I had a couple different forms of chest pain throughout this whole journey of long COVID. It was I went to the ER because I kept having these chest pains right before Christmas. I went to the ER and I had them check out my heart, and they did an echocardiogram on it, and they did all their stuff, and it ended up being something they couldn't even tell me what was wrong. All my blood tests came back normal. The echocardiogram looked normal. They basically said you have costochondritis, which is like inflammation of the sternum and like the ribs right in this area. And they gave me some muscle relaxers, sent me on my way, really, and just said, "You're not dying, get out of here." So yeah, I had that chest pain. I also had another chest pain that At the time, I didn't really know what it was, but I had now what I know as neuropathy that was going through my chest. It was just nerve pain. Don't know why this virus caused that, but I've heard of a couple other people who had it, and I ended up getting on some
Very typical symptoms, just like you would read on the CDC website. Started with fever, nausea, body ache, fatigue, trouble concentrating, and it lasted 10 days. We did have a loss. And when I say we, my husband and my kids got it too. My son is 2, and I don't really know. He didn't have as many symptoms, but we did have a loss of taste and smell for a period of time as well.
Yeah. So it sounds like that was really stressful for your whole family.
It was very stressful. And what was stressful about it is that our family members, our older family members, the ones at high risk, were taking care of our kids. And we knew that they were putting themselves at risk. It was kind of okay. It was accepted, like, this is what we're going to do, because our kids were not in school and we had to work, particularly my mother-in-law, who had taken care of our kids the day that we had found out that we tested positive for COVID.
Yeah. Okay. I can just imagine how scary that was. And there was so much collective fear at that time. But the symptoms passed, right? So you got better from the acute COVID.
Yep.
And then what happened in December? So let's fast forward a month or two when you started getting these sort of post-COVID symptoms.
So it was around the holiday season. I was pretty amped up anyways, just because I had a lot to take care of with the family. And as my adrenaline was going up, I was having trouble sleeping, but not enough to really even think about it too much. I also had a chronic cough. I get chronic coughs often after I get sick. And a family member had said, hey, have you been checked out by a doctor? A lot of people are having post-COVID symptoms. You might want to get that checked out. I went and saw a naturopath to try some home remedies for my cough. Eventually, symptoms started to rise. I thought I had like acid reflux. Maybe I did. I saw my primary care physician just for some acid reflux medication, but my chest still kind of hurt. I also had some weird sweating events at night. So like my body temperature was really off. I had some cramping and some heart palpitations. What I now know could be described as POTS, P-O-T-S. I did not know that that was a thing until I had these symptoms and looked that up. And then I continued to see my doctor. And then she had prescribed anxiety medication. I've never been on anxiety medication, but I could not sleep. And so this was supposed to help me to sleep. And then I took even a stronger sleeping medication, and it just was not working.
Oh, it is so hard when we can't sleep. I completely get that. And it sounds like the stress was rising, the symptoms were rising. At one point, you even drove yourself to the hospital to get checked?
Yeah, so it was another night of no sleep, which was very fearful. I've never had sleeping problems. And so it was at 3 a.m. and I thought, you know what, I better go now because I have to take care of my family in the morning. So I left my kids at home with my husband and I drove myself to the hospital. Everything checked out fine. My blood work came back and everything was normal.
Wow.
So my symptoms were initially, with the initial infection, I didn't have a cough. I had a bit of a stuffy nose, slight headache, and just felt a bit achy. And then after about a week or two, that then they kind of changed around. So then it was quite severe brain fog, which lasted quite a long time. And then fatigue, which is very different to tiredness, let me just say. Sensitive to bright lights and, overstimulating environments. I guess, and then all sorts of things. I had headaches for a period of time. I had chest pains for a period of time. I had some rashes as well. So it was a pretty grim experience. Each one would finish and then another would kind of start. And so I would say the initial acute infection probably lasted for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, what I was kind of left with was the brain fog and the fatigue and the weakness and yeah, just feeling completely like, you know, debilitated really.